Rest in peace, Joe Pilates. You would have loved our podcast.
You would have loved it.
You would have loved Pelvic POV.
There's also
Welcome to Pelvic POV with your hosts and doctors of physical therapy, Amanda Neary and Hannah Meyer. What's up, pelvic freaks? Welcome back to another episode of Pelvic POV.
We're your freaks for us and we're freaks for your pelvis, baby.
Today we are so excited because we have our first guest on the podcast.
Yay! We're talking all things Pilates today because our core stability episode, we had you guys ask in or write in some questions about Pilates specifically because we brought up Pilates in that episode. If you haven't listened, go back and listen to that episode. But anyways, we're talking Pilates today. Let me go ahead and introduce our lovely guest.
Yay!
So as you see to the left of me, maybe you're right. I don't know. I'm panicking. This is M. Harris, aka Blue Lace Baby.
yes.
On IG.
Mhm.
But we'll get to that. Don't worry. Em, go ahead and tell us about yourself.
So I have been in the Pilates industry as a professional for almost 10 years, but my history with Pilates goes back to when I was 8 years old. My mom started taking Pilates after her last pregnancy. So to kind of full circle that, I would attend her sessions and sit in on them, watch from the Cadillac. And then in 2015, after I graduated with a degree in poetry,
Lovely.
I didn't know that about you.
yes, I came back to Chicago and was like, what do I do? What do I do from here? And so I took my mom's teacher training in the northwest suburbs. Amanda and I are actually from the same hometown randomly. And then shortly after I finished training, which was like 500 hours, took me a year,
Oh, that's so much.
it's a lot.
I didn't know that how intense the training is.
Yeah. So that's kind of why there can be a little bit of tension between comprehensively trained Pilates instructors and Pilates inspired fitness classes.
Like Mega Reformer,
like Mega
Legree,
Reformer,
Solid Core.
Legree. And there's no shame or shade or hate towards that industry. And I know that they're doing a ton to try and move away from being associated with Pilates.
Mhm.
But the training is just very different.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the difference between like reading a chapter in a book and taking like a college educated
Yes.
approach. You know
okay,
what I mean?
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that those instructors can't be wonderful instructors, because I know a ton of them and they are.
And it's just a whole different.
It's just a whole different ballgame.
vibe. Yeah.
So I started teaching at East Bank Club in River North in 2016 and packed my schedule. I had been an athlete in high school and college, so I had that like kind of disordered mentality around exercise and working out, coupled with the fact that I had lost my dad in 2015. So I was also dealing with a lot of grief. And my only tools in my toolbox at that time were work harder, exercise harder, work more, do more, you know. That hustle culture was ingrained in me in a way that I couldn't even really like recognize at the time. And there was a coworker of mine who had said one of my first days teaching Pilates at East Bank, he was like, you need to look the part to get
Dude.
clients, you know?
Yes.
And this was at a time where I had been dealing with grief and my weight had always fluctuated, but I was like definitely in a place where I was more insecure about how my body looked and the size of it. And so that kind of did triggered some disordered habits, you know?
I love that you said that because I feel like that's an experience that so many people in the fitness industry have.
Oh, 100%.
When I first started personal training, I felt like I was like, I need to look like the strongest bitch so that people can like look at me and be like, I want to train with her. And like, I felt, and it's like a toxic mentality. You also are a personal trainer. Worked in personal training a long time.
No,
Did you have this similar?
Absolutely. Like, and I've also worked at places that like claim to be body positive and then actually aren't.
Yeah.
And, like,
It's messed up.
the vibe is still for an aesthetic. So like as a trainer, my mentality was always like, I'm here to get you stronger and we can achieve like fitness related goals. But like aesthetically, I'm not the person. That's not like what we're going to be doing together.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot that needs to be examined if the way that you're choosing the people that you work with in the fitness industry, if the only factor for you is how they look, I think that's a moment that you can do some reflection and be like, okay, where does that come from? Do these people have my best interest? Do they have the qualifications? There's a lot that happened in 2020, especially on social media, where people all of a sudden had larger platforms and not necessarily like a lot of credentials to back it up.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like made sure, I think it was actually in 2020 to unfollow like all the like fitness influencers. And then I specifically, because I was in PT school at the time, I followed like PTs and like certified people with the credentials just to make sure I wasn't getting like toxic content and comparing myself.
And some of it is so covert and just like baked into the industry itself. Like, especially with Pilates, there's an association with this person that does Pilates, this sort of figment of a person that like is wealthy, lives in the suburbs, might be a mom.
Pilates princess.
Yeah, Pilates princess, hot Pilates mom. These like kind of tropes around the Pilates industry that have been kind of more, they've always been present, but they've been more recently like in the spotlight through trending audios about people going to Pilates classes, through just diet culture and fitness culture in their most toxic form.
Which makes Pilates so intimidating for people.
100%. And it sucks as someone who is not in the industry to necessarily be a person that's working at a studio that has like 12 reformers and is just going to kind of like be a group class fitness model. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. There's a place for that in the industry. But I'm really more specialized and focused on people with special conditions, people recovering from injury, people rehabbing their pelvic floor postpartum.
Which is why we wanted to reach out to you.
Yeah, exactly.
That kind of takes us into the general discussion of what is Pilates. Like, let's hear your take on it. I want to hear.
Because I was reading like your notes on Pilates.
My
and I was
extensive notes.
No, I love that because I'm like, I don't know as much about Pilates as I thought I did. So I'm so excited to hear you talk about it.
So in the same way that a lot of people grew up like with
wait, really quick, because I was reading through and the first thing I was just like glancing through and I saw World War I and I was like, wait a second, where is this going?
But anyways, so there's a history of Pilates. I mean, so Pilates itself refers to the man, Joseph Pilates, who created his method of physical exercise, which he called contrology, because of its principles around control in movement, centering yourself, alignment, breath. It is a method that is inherently trying to connect your brain and your body and your breath. So it is a mind-body-spirit practice or a mind-body-breath practice. And that is why it's so successful at like rehabbing injuries. And Joseph Pilates himself was born just outside of Dusseldorf in Germany in 1883. And he was born with like rickets, asthma. There's like another random kind of breathing disorder that he had that I don't remember the name of. Because of all his conditions with his physical body as a kid, he ended up spending a lot of time in nature where he observed animals moving and kind of developed an appreciation for the way that the natural world works and the way that animals move. So that's why we have a lot of exercises like swan and tree and frog and yeah, right.
Frog pose.
Well, it's a different frog.
Oh,
yeah. It's okay. It's okay.
You can show me later.
Not the yoga frog.
Yeah. So that's the other thing too, and I think we'll bring it up in a little bit, like in some of the questions that you guys had given me around like the difference between yoga and Pilates. So back to Joe. Mr. Pilates himself. I don't know him personally because he's
back to Joe.
Back to Joe. He ended up being interned in a camp during World War I after he had moved from Germany to England. And he, in the internment camp, spent time rehabbing injured and disabled soldiers. It is a story that we tell in Pilates, like the lore, if you will, that he like used hospital bed springs and the kind of frame of the hospital bed to create his equipment.
This is so cool.
Yeah. So in the same way that you guys like grew up with fairy tales, I grew up with like Joseph Pilates lore.
Not Joseph Pilates lore. I love that.
So after the war ended, he went back to Germany for a time, developed his exercise routine, which at first was the mat work. So the mat work is like the original contrology work. He said, how can we have world peace if our nation's top leaders can't do my first 10 exercises correctly? So, yeah,
wow.
There's that. Mic drop, Joe.
Literally. Damn, Joe.
Yeah. So he came to America in the 1920s. He met his wife Clara and opened the first Pilates studio on 8th Street in New York City in 1926. He wanted originally to train male boxers because a lot of his movement philosophies were developed in German gymnasiums where boys and young men and dads would go after work to work out in what we now know as a gym, where they had lots of equipment. They did Olympic weightlifting and gymnastics and fencing and boxing. So when he came to America, he wanted to train men. He wanted to train male boxers. His method of moving and breathing to create power in movement through breath. But what ended up happening was he was also, kitty corner from the dance world. And so he gained a reputation for helping injured dancers rehabilitate from injuries. So that is really where we see the shift of Joe's work being primarily for men versus how it has developed into something that we see as like women's exercise, which is just simply not true at all. So yeah, in that vein, a lot of his work was carried on after he died by women that he taught. And there's kind of a group of people, and there are men in that group, like kind of 6 to 9 maybe, can be considered like Pilates elders, right? And then from that work that those people did, we as Pilates instructors who are trained in like classical or contemporary Pilates methods can trace our quote unquote lineage back through to Joe Pilates himself. So
very cool.
Yeah. In comparison to yoga's been around for 5,000 years, and Pilates, it will be 100 years old in 2026, but we are like infants in comparison to a practice like yoga.
Yeah.
Wait, should we touch on like the differences between Pilates and yoga really
Sure,
quick?
yeah.
Yeah.
So aside from just like the history of yoga being far more extensive, there's a lot more emphasis on the spirituality in yoga. Historically, like yoga was a comprehensive life practice that also incorporated movement on a mat, versus Pilates, which is more primarily focused on rehabilitation of the physical condition. And there is incorporation of breath because of the way that Joe studied how movement and breath impact each other. So that's where kind of we can discuss a little bit of breath and its importance in movement, its relationship to the pelvic floor. There's a lot more focus in Pilates on alignment, which it's not that there's not in yoga. There is a ton of crossover, like Pilates can also be done on a mat, but the difference itself in the way that we approach Pilates now and yoga now, I think there's been a shift in culture around what people view as Pilates versus what people view as yoga. I think it got a little muddy in 2020 online because there is so much, there's only so many ways the body can move. So it's like when we compare these modalities,
Right.
there's going to be crossover
Yeah.
because there's also crossover with like Pilates and bar, and like bar takes a lot of what Pilates is, but bar is also inspired by you know, dance. So it's like how do you compare apples to apples?
It's just like how they say there's no original music because every music has like you know what have you heard that before? There's like no original works of art because you get these.
Yeah, you're inspired by like different things that already exist.
Similar with
I think
fitness.
like a big difference between Pilates and yoga though is like the spiritual component.
100%.
And like yoga was born as like a Hindu spiritual cultural thing. And the same way like Pilates has transformed into this like stereotype of like rich white ladies doing it, like yoga is also doing that, and they're like kind of appropriating an entire culture by doing so.
So in some ways I feel like rich white women doing Pilates is a lot more ethical than rich white women like sitting in the suburbs doing yoga and being like, the practice of yoga is just simply when I go to hot yoga and sweat on my mat. Yeah. You know, it is appropriation. Whereas, I mean, Pilates is what it is. It is historically expensive.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so that's definitely something in the industry that we talk about a lot. How do we make it more accessible while maintaining, you know, kind of our own, for lack of a better word, like egos around like what we should be paid and our expertise and our knowledge. A lot of us have done, you know, hundreds of hours of continuing education on top of our certifications. So it's complicated.
It is
complicated.
Yeah. And we feel that way in PT too. Like healthcare is expensive, and like in an ideal world, could we provide these services for free? That would be amazing. But
I mean, have you ever tried to take like a YouTube Pilates class, and it is so hard to follow the instructor, and I'm like stressed. I'm just like, what am I doing? I love having an instructor be like, this is what you need to do, like, and then you can correct their form, which you do like a lot of one-on-one.
Yeah.
Work,
so right? I've moved away from teaching group class. Occasionally, I will sub for Catalyst for their splits classes, things like that.
Which Catalyst is like a pole studio.
Yes, in the Chicagoland area. Yeah. But I primarily work one-on-one with clients, so kind of in a similar fashion to how you guys work. I find that people get better results that way, although it's not for everyone financially. It's not for everyone just time-wise, you know. But I see clients between like 1 to 3 times a week around the city, and I'll go to their houses or I'll teach them virtually, or I will operate out of a studio in River West called River West Fitness, and it's just like private studio space. And I like working one-on-one with clients to develop a deeper understanding of their goals and needs, and to really watch things like form, especially when there are spinal conditions or if someone is postpartum. It's just a lot safer for everyone because the equipment is inherently a little bit dangerous.
It is.
You know, so there's a lot that you need to manage as an instructor between form, function, and then safety.
And I feel like, so we refer our patients that come for, whether they have like chronic pain, whatever it is, we'll like tell them to take Pilates class. Like if they're trying to think of like, they're like, I want to get back to exercising and working out, but I don't know what I want to do. It's like, oh, have you ever tried Pilates? It would be a great thing to transition to from pelvic floor PT for long-term management. And a normal like a Pilates group class can be super overwhelming because it's like, what is this big scary machine and all these springs, and how do I know when to switch, and like what's easier, what's harder, because each move is different with their spring load. Sometimes more springs makes the move easier, or it could make the move harder.
Exactly.
So then we'll be like, well, have you ever thought about like doing like a one-on-one Pilates moment? Is just like super beneficial.
What do people say when you suggest private Pilates?
Price
for
sure.
Price is the major factor. I do sliding scale, so I don't have the same price point for my clients who are very very wealthy versus my clients who are more my contemporaries in age and financially. I think that's important, and there's been a big shift for a lot of teachers around how they price. But that being said, like I am always trying to come up with ways to create opportunities for people to have experiences with Pilates. I am working behind the scenes on getting some videos filmed and posted on YouTube that are just simple, basic 10-minute beginning Pilates exercises that anyone can do that are safe. But the thing with it is like, I do not know the person that's going to be taking said class on YouTube. I don't know their body history. I don't know spinal conditions they might have. So it's really comes down to like education. That's why I think pelvic floor PTs of all kinds are wonderful, because it can be more accessible, although insurance is a whole nother conversation, for people that are looking for those corrections in their movements so that they can confidently enter a class, like a group Pilates class.
Just the work that we try to emphasize on like the transversus abdominis and how to actually engage that muscle.
Yeah.
So many patients come in and they're like, oh, I took a class and they like mentioned drawing your belly button to your spine, but I never knew what that meant until we're like actually cueing it one-on-one.
Yeah.
And I feel like if the accessibility isn't there to like do privates before trying a group class, they're at least getting like a tiny foundation
100%.
into what that feels like, which is nice.
Yeah.
My mom took a group Pilates class with me, and she just like was not following, and she kept messing up. She was the first new person.
Yeah.
I mean, she was the only new person in that class, and I could tell that she was like a little overwhelmed. And I was trying to help her at the same time, and the instructor was like, just kept calling her out and being like, Kim, no, do this. And I was like, no, like stop calling her out. She'll figure it out on her own.
I know. And that's the thing that can be hard too as an instructor. As an instructor in a group Pilates class, you kind of do have to teach in a way that's progressive for people who have taken a lot of classes with you, but also teach to the level of the person who is the most beginner in the class. And there is a way to do that is not like calling someone out directly,
being like quiet, like walking up and like adjusting form.
And I used to teach 10 group classes of 6 people in a class a week. So I, did get quite good at being able to make sure it was challenged appropriately and provide progressive modifications that people can do. Yeah, it definitely is just time and experience. But I think there can be a lot that instructors can do to make sure that they're being kind of as inclusive and as progressive with their thinking about who's in the class, the bodies that are in the class, kind of just being mindful, right? Like I think there's a lot of people that avoid group Pilates classes, and I know this to be true because I teach them, that don't want to go and take even a group Pilates class that is with a comprehensively trained instructor because they're afraid of going into the room itself with the body that they currently live in, whatever that insecurity is for them. There is value in creating a private, safe space for people to have positive experiences with their body. And I think that's where like my niche is. That's what I'm really good at. And I think the group Pilates stuff, it just is what it is at times.
Eventually, with the more classes you take, it gets easier too.
It does.
Like the first time is overwhelming. That's with any kind of group fitness. If you go to like take a boxing class for the first time, it's going to feel very intimidating.
100%. And your instructor wants you to ask questions. They want you to like 5 minutes before class be like, hey, this is my first time on the reformer. Can you like give me some pointers? Can you show me how to be safe? Right?
Okay, yes. This is like was kind of a listener question because, I have patients that come in and they're like, what should I avoid in Pilates? Like, and then I'm like, well, talk to your instructor, let them know that you're pregnant or like let them know like if you have an injury, whatever, and they should be able to make those modifications for you because they're trained. Yeah. So don't be afraid. Don't like stop going to Pilates because I had a patient that was like, my Pilates instructor told me to avoid twisting at all. And I was like, well, you have to twist every day with like, you have to be able to twist during your pregnancy. But like, I think that was just like a one-off
One-off,
situation.
yeah.
But like,
No, but there's some things like that depending on how far along you are in pregnancy, like you could be safe up to 16 weeks in a regular Pilates class. And then you might want to look for something that's more perinatal focused.
yeah.
And there are such things, they exist. I did my pelvic floor training on the perinatal client in Roscoe Village with Jacqueline Brennan at Pilates and Coffee. And their studio has a ton of prenatal classes and perinatal safe classes
Cool.
for the prenatal and postnatal body. There are opportunities for movement like that. You just kind of have to be educated and know where to look. But a lot of good instructors should be able to accommodate you in a group class, no matter who you are.
And that goes for anything, like whether it's like fitness level, because this was one of the questions that we were talking about, fitness level, pregnancy, or just like not as experienced in Pilates, you can make those modifications.
100%.
Or even like balance issues. You have like the balance bar I've seen, right?
Mm-hmm. There's like poles that we use for balance. Pilates is inherently a adaptable modality that has hundreds of exercises and hundreds of modifications to those exercises, up leveling and down leveling. So the benefit of working with like a seasoned Pilates instructor is that they'll have more experiences with more people who might be like yourself. And so therefore they will be more prepared. But as a fresh instructor, of course, there were people in my classes that I had experiences with that I can look back on and be like, oh, wow, I could have just done X, Y, or Z, and that would have made them more comfortable. You know, people of different sizes, people of different fitness levels. So I can reflect back on those kind of early days of teaching and grow from it, you know?
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about like, because we touched on this a little bit, but the relationship between PT and Pilates.
Yes.
Or pelvic floor PT specifically. Are you like in your sessions, are you cueing for any like pelvic floor engagement? Or...
Typically, I don't.
Okay.
Because Pilates itself, depending on who the person is.
Yes.
And what their experience is. If they're in pelvic floor PT and I know that about them, and they have awareness around their condition currently, I may or may not. But as a Pilates instructor, I'm not a pelvic floor PT. I don't do internal assessments. I cannot actually gauge what you are doing internally when you think that you are engaging your pelvic floor.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of times I actually get clients who are so hypertonic and they're so tight and they think that they're engaging their pelvic floor by just like kegling through and like holding that like throughout, when in reality, a lot more times people need to relax their pelvic floor.
I'm going to cry.
This is so refreshing.
This is amazing.
No, this is refreshing because we like, obviously in every field people have different degrees of training, right? And we like do get healthcare professional or fitness professionals reaching out to us all the time that are like, oh, I'd love to come on your podcast or like watch this video, and it's the wrong information.
Yeah.
So like just hearing you say that is like, oh my God, a breath of fresh air. Like,
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I love to hear that.
We are out there. We are trying.
Oh, no. I know that they're abundant too,
Yeah.
but like, you know, where there's like a million good people, there's like 5 million.
100%. And a lot of times the people that we see the most or that are being pushed to us on social media, just like have an aesthetic body type and are doing Pilates. And so they get pushed out, but they may not have the years of experience or the understanding or the training. Because in your Pilates training, we had a whole weekend where a pelvic floor therapist came and talked to us about the perinatal client, right? And that was like years ago. But then I also did additional training because that was just like a weekend, you know, and I wanted to know more and better serve the people that I was seeing inside the studio. So it can be up to the teacher itself to have the desire to learn more. So it really is just,
yeah,
it's gorgeous.
I love it. That was so well said.
Thank
you.
Yeah.
One of my old clients, she's not, I say old clients as in former clients. She was very, very tight in her pelvic floor and I could see it. She was like over focused on like where to be for her neutral and she couldn't really digest the information around breath that I was trying to relay to her.
Breath is the hardest thing.
It is. And so she decided to go to a pelvic floor PT, which I encouraged. The pelvic floor PT was like, girl, you need to like breathe and relax, and have you tried X, Y, and Z? And this is what we're going to do for your hypertonic pelvic floor. And she came back to me and she was like, I didn't really like that, because that's not like, I just want a flat belly, you know, I just want, like, she had very specific aesthetic goals. And ultimately she ended up getting pregnant and she had a 4th-degree tear.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Ouch.
So, and this was stuff that I was actively talking to her about, like the risks of being pregnant and delivering vaginally when you have not learned to relax.
Yeah.
Right. And that's an unfortunate situation, but I can only do so much. And I'm also not a doctor. So
yeah, it sounds like you did what you could in the situation. You like advocated for your patient and or your patient,
my client,
your client, and then like and push them to like encourage them to see a pelvic floor PT. And then at that point, it's up to the patient or the client.
The client itself.
Yeah, I mean, in our offices too. Like all we can do at the end of the day is make our clinical recommendation.
Yeah,
and it's up to the patient to take that or not.
Yeah.
And we can't
help
everyone.
And on the flip side, I think I was telling Hannah recently, I have a client who is in her 50s who
I was going to ask you about this.
Is, first of all, she's wonderful. I know she's going to listen to the podcast, so shout out. But like, I had to tell her when I first started working with her, like, hey, even though your youngest kid is, I think maybe 10 or 11 at the time, like, you still are a postpartum body. Like, you still have work to do around breath and core and the engagement that you are feeling or not feeling, because it was contributing to chronic low back pain, you know? And that was like the difference, because she had always been active, was a runner, did triathlons, was working with personal trainers at the time, and viewed herself as like cheating through exercises because she didn't have that same like feeling of core work or whatever. So she sought out Pilates to work on
like
those
retrain
things.
Those muscles.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah. But even me relaying that information to her came off as like a surprise. You know what I mean? Because it's like, and that's kind of my advice to like women who are recovering from birth, is just go slow and take your time to rebuild, because you want the foundation to be strong so that you can go and resume the exercises that you love to do in a way that's safe.
Yeah, I would say that my postpartum patients that were athletes, whether it was like during pregnancy or before pregnancy, like CrossFit athletes or marathon runners, I feel like they have the hardest time adjusting to like trying to take it slow because they want to jump back in so quickly, but then that's when you can get some dysfunction. But like slowing down, taking your time is a really good tip.
Yeah,
sure.
Absolutely. Like there's no rush. 4th trimester is real. Giving yourself a lot of space, grace, and like empathy is necessary. But it's also, it sucks because it's just kind of baked into this belief around like women bouncing back after pregnant, and they use Pilates like in their, you know, rhetoric around how they, you know, achieved their bouncing back after birth body, like whatever that is, you know. So it's complex. There's a lot that's under the surface of all of our motivations for why we think and feel that sense of urgency around recovery. And that really goes for all recovery from injury.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I always have to like check myself when I'm explaining this to patients, because meeting people where they're at is always a challenge when you're like specialized in a field and you know the information. And it's like, where do I need to start with this person to like work with them on this pathway? Because like they have their goals and those are valid and whatnot. How are we realistically going to like get them there in a way that makes sense for their healing timeline? And then like, where do we start with the education? Because there's so much education that we do.
That's the hard part. I just taught a new client last Friday, and she had taken a group reformer class, but felt her neck, felt her back, didn't feel her core, and was just confused a little bit by the experience that she had had. And it's so simple. The modifications needed are so simple. It's like group fitness and group Pilates classes are so close. Like, but all she needed was like a balance disc under her pelvis to get her into her low belly. I wasn't even cueing pelvic floor engagement, and she was doing feet and straps with a balance disc under her pelvis. And she was like, well, I feel it here, pointing to like the lowest portion of her core that she could possibly feel. And she was like, I've never felt that before, you know? And so it's cool
so
to
hard
have
to get that.
Yeah, it's lucky for me to be in those situations and have those good experiences with people. And like the modifications needed to get there are just so minimal. But that is really kind of like what you're paying for when you pay for private instruction, is you're paying for that eye to watch you and the experience and knowledge that they've had prior to like make it simple for you to feel that connection. I mean, I've paid for sessions with Pilates instructors that were not reaffirming in a positive way, that were very hypercritical. Sometimes instructors who come from a different generation, who have even more of that like toxic diet fitness culture baked into their belief system, can create environments that are not affirming of the things that I want to be affirmed in, you know? So
we talked in an episode about like patients having preferences in their providers and making sure you're interviewing them too, because everyone treats differently and will appeal to a different person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I want to dive a little bit deeper into like your pelvic floor specialization within Pilates, and like one, for our knowledge of when we refer pregnant patients to it and what we should be telling them. And then two, for anyone listening, like what are your adaptations? How do you typically approach that in like the second and third trimester and postpartum?
Yes, because we don't want you to stop working out when you're pregnant. You want to keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, we want to prep you for labor and birth, right? So the focus is a lot on hip strengthening, rotation in hips, in as much of that mobility as you can create in your pelvis and hips, while maintaining like a relationship with breath and like what's going on. I do a lot of like hug the baby with your exhale around second and third trimester, because they're getting those ultrasounds where you can see the baby. They're like, so there's a lot psychologically that you can do to create safety and kind of joy and excitement in pregnancy. And I love teaching pregnant women.
Gorgeous. I like to hug the baby.
Yeah. Because it's a way to cue that transversus engagement, but it's also the way that you communicate around that, like,
because especially core training is important during pregnancy,
and breath work is core work,
and people are afraid to do core work during pregnancy, but I think they're thinking like sit-ups, like crunches, like
yes. And when I'm referring to core, like you guys have talked about it too on the podcast, I'm referring to the whole trunk. Joseph Pilates referred to it as the powerhouse, right? And so the breath that
I love it. Could not be a better guest on our podcast, seriously.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going, sorry.
So, I'm going to do a lot of stabilizing of the hips, right? Creating stability through how we're engaging on the reformer, right? So I'm definitely not going to have you on your back, but we'll do like side lying, feet and strap, leg work to work the hips. There's a lot of ways, and like I said, a lot of different exercises in Pilates. And so there are hundreds that you can still do safely as a pregnant person. I do love to focus on thoracic extension, right? Especially because you have a growing belly, and that's going to pull you forward more and more, which is going to compress your diaphragm. So as much as we can, working on that, the posterior chain of your body is so essential. I also like anti-rotation exercises. I know you were talking about like avoiding rotation. I think maybe what the instructor was referring to was like not like twisting with compression, but like twisting with a strong trunk, right?
That's
so
why
like,
we've talked about like pale-off press before.
yes,
Stuff
literally.
like that.
I think it's in my notes. Yeah. Anti-rotation
Gorgeous.
exercises like pale-off press.
Yeah.
Like wide and stable bases for movement. So I'm not going to have someone stand with their like feet together and push the reformer out or whatever on the box. Like I'm going to create wide and stable base that is relative to their changing body, right? I do limit adductor work because of the pubic symphysis separation, right? So there's some things like I'm not going to leave someone in a stretch for 2 minutes, like because there's a increase in relaxin in the body. Like we don't need to be stretching the ligaments out. We want to create strength and mobility in the sense that you can move into your depth of range of motion and out of it with strength and not just like falling into a stretch and staying there forever and creating lots of other issues, right?
I love the way you word some of these things because it's just like a little bit different than our language, but like it's all the same. As
Yeah,
what we're
like
teaching
when
people,
we're
so
working,
it's great.
if I'm working with someone who's pregnant, I'll have them like rock in a child's pose for like some hip mobility rather than like with like the knees out, feet in, rather than like sitting in a butterfly stretch for like 3 minutes.
Yeah, like creating places where they can find active stretch as opposed to passive stretch is great. I program around a little differently for pregnant women by not moving them too quickly, like up and off different positions on the reformer. Like I might do a whole series on one side, feet and strap, arm and strap, and then flip them to the other side, feet and strap, arm and strap. And then we'll do a standing series, and then we'll do a quadruped series.
Being mindful of like
being
positioning
mindful of
because it might
positioning.
take longer to switch.
It might be more uncomfortable. I have Pilates students that really just want to focus more on their mental status and mental health during pregnancy. And then I have people who have more physical goals in mind, like maintaining strength and creating strength. You know, you can still get gains during pregnancy.
Totally.
For real.
I love this. Yay. Okay. If anyone is our patient listening, write this down. That was a lot of good info. We love that.
Thank you.
Let's jump into maybe some rapid fire questions
Yes.
that we've got from some people. Let's see. Amanda, what do you think? Where do you want to start? You choose yours.
Okay.
I want you to choose it because I like when you choose.
You like when I choose. That's
yeah,
funny. Ooh, okay. Is Pilates suitable for beginners, or do I need a certain level of fitness to start?
Yes, Pilates is great for anybody. I think some of these questions, I was like, yes. Like, that is
That's something people ask us, though.
I know. And I think it comes from the belief that you have to already have like a certain level of fitness to be able to step into a gym of any kind. Pilates is definitely suitable for literally anybody. Anybody of any size, of any fitness level that wants to do Pilates can absolutely do Pilates. I do recommend getting some level of private instruction first if it's accessible to you. A lot of studios will even have beginner group classes that move a little slower with more emphasis on setup of the reformer, how to keep yourself safe. So even at like a lower price point in a group class, you can get good instruction for safety and personal safety of your body and also safety on the reformer. Any good instructor is going to be able to operate a group class like that is mindful of beginners. So just be mindful of who you're going to, the studio, the culture of the studio, read the website, read the about me, like do your research, about where you're going, because that will definitely impact your experience, right? I do think private instruction is great if you can afford it at the beginning of your experience with Pilates. It's just going to make everything better, even if you just do 1 or 2 sessions, right? You're investing in the education to keep yourself safe.
Yeah.
Awesome. I have a question that wasn't submitted, but I get asked this all the time by people. That's why I want to ask. Mega reformer versus regular reformer. What is like the big difference and which one should I take? Is the question I get asked.
Yeah. So the big difference is in the education of the instructor. That's first and foremost. the equipment itself is different. A mega reformer has 2 movable parts, although a lot of Pilates reformers now, not 2 movable parts, but 2 sides that
2
you can stand on,
platforms.
2 platforms. A lot of Pilates reformers now have made like a secondary platform, or there's a lot of ways you can adapt kind of similar, more contemporary work on the reformer that you can do on Megaformer. The other thing too is I have taken Legree classes. I haven't been to solid core because I just won't.
Neither have I.
But
Fair. I haven't been to
I'm
solid
usually in the corner doing
Mhm.
my own thing and
Yeah.
putting more resistance on
Mhm.
because oftentimes they want you to use the least resistance possible. So it ends up being kind of like a HIIT style class on like really low resistance, which is why you feel like so worked out the next day. But it's not necessarily like better than supplying your body with the appropriate resistance comparable to who you are, your body size. So I would just say if you are going to go into a Megaformer class, don't be afraid to like give yourself more resistance. If you are feeling, feet and straps in your low back, that's a sign that you need some more support, right? And
Mhm.
it's relative to who you are. So even in Pilates, as I teach it, spring tension is going to be relative to the body that's moving on the machine. That's just physics. That's just the way it works, right? So
Mhm.
a lot of the recommendations in the classical method for spring tension, I will ignore even myself because I know how I want it to feel for me. And so if I'm a heavier person, I'm going to need stronger resistance versus someone that is really petite is going to need less tension, right? So just keep that in mind. Like tension is always relative to who you are. Megaformers can be a little bit more dangerous, in my personal opinion, just because the class sizes are usually larger.
Mhm.
So there's just no way that any instructor can keep
An eye on you at all
an
times.
eye on you at all times. So I would say only go if you are super confident in your ability to self-correct and kind of do a little bit of self-teaching. And just know it's a really hard workout. Like
Yeah,
it's
it is.
very difficult, even for someone who does Pilates all the time,
Mhm.
right? That doesn't make it better or worse than Pilates.
It's
Just is different,
Can we talk about the Cadillac?
Yeah. Oh my god.
I've never done a Cadillac. I've never
Is that
done a
with the
Cadillac.
bars on top.
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted
Have
to
you?
talk about that too. No, I've never done it.
Yeah.
Oh my god, we should totally do like.
Yeah.
I would love to teach you guys. We could do like a
Yay.
little duet.
I feel like I'd love to like
let's
climb
do it.
around on that
Yeah,
little thing.
yeah. You would love it.
Yeah, you would love it.
So the other thing is like a Megaformer studio just has the Megaformer. That's their equipment. That's it.
Uh-huh.
Right. Joseph Pilates created the Reformer. He created the Cadillac, which is a raised bed with metal poles over top. So there's a lot of opportunities to do a million other different creative exercises that he created. And then there's also things like the Wunda chair or the low chair
Mhm.
that was meant to be the first at-home exercise piece of equipment that could also be a home furnishing, because if you flip the Wunda chair on its side, it is meant to be like a chair. I will provide a supplemented video for this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's how whenever we describe things, we're just like,
yeah, we're like, it is a chair.
We're
thing.
like, check our Instagram
we're
story.
like, here is the
check the
clitoris
Instagram story.
right here.
Yes. Click the link. And he also created pieces of equipment that we don't really see even in contemporary studios today. Like the breathicizer was this little like pinwheel with a straw that he used to teach people how to exhale fully, right? So you would like, it was a little pinwheel and you would blow it, and then he would
Mhm.
basically help you learn to control your breath by either cueing you to make the pinwheel go really fast or go really slow. Very interesting.
Mhm.
The breathicizer. There's also smaller pieces of equipment like the spine corrector. There's a ladder barrel that is really fun to flip around on. There are smaller pieces of equipment like the foot corrector and the toe corrector and the pedipole, which are all at River West Fitness. So come see me. We can play around on all
Yeah, we
the
gotta
archival
play.
stuff. Yeah.
This
It'd
This
be
is
super
inspiring
fun.
me.
Yeah.
And you know what? I always like prefer a reformer class to
Yeah.
a mega reformer class. And like, I do like Legree, so I don't want to like shit on them.
No, I don't
You know,
either.
I know,
Like,
I
I
go
also
to, I go to
think it's
Calligree
great.
class.
But the reason I end up going there more often is because of the class size, because I can actually get in. Like when you have a schedule
Yeah.
that changes
Yeah.
a lot, it's so hard to sign up for reformer classes in advance,
100%.
which can be like a barrier for people to get in because
Absolutely.
they're so small and so targeted.
Yeah.
Which is ultimately awesome, but like I don't know when I can go.
I know. That's why you just now you've
I
got
I got you.
now you got me.
We have a
and-
reformer here. We just got to get you in our space.
Yeah, we just had to walk through the door. Yeah.
Oh god.
Yeah, I'm excited. I want to try the Cadillac.
Yeah, that'd be so fun.
Yeah,
I'm like
you guys would
I
have
just want to like do Pilates now.
I know. It's fun, guys. Like there's so many cool things.
And I feel like a baddie
yeah.
when I'm doing it because I'm like, this is fucking hard.
Yeah. We've got to set up a time to get you both in
Well, even
in
when
the
I've
studio.
taken your class at Catalyst, when we worked on like, we did like more mat stuff and did like light mobility stuff, like it felt so good after that.
It just feels good.
Yeah.
I just like
we weren't even focused on like being like core significant like core stuff or like strengthening stuff. We were focusing a lot more on mobility and I felt so great. I mean, it was a splits class, but yeah.
My splits class ends up
that's
being
why
mostly just like hip mobility.
Yeah, no, that's why I like it. Because I work on with hip mobility. I work on hip mobility with people all day, and I'm like, I need to work on my own.
Mm-hmm. I know. That's so hard to just even. I'm sure you can agree. Like getting your own movement in when you are teaching,
practicing what you
movement in any
preach.
capacity.
Yeah,
it can be difficult.
I have a rapid fire question.
I was going to ask one.
Oh,
I wonder if it's the same one.
No, I just made. I just said this one. I have one myself.
Okay,
that is not on the list.
Okay, give me one.
Do you like? Okay, I don't even know if it's a rapid fire question. Do you always incorporate some component of like mat and reformer with your privates?
Yes.
Or, okay, so you're doing both
yes,
all the time.
Because mat work, my clients can take home with them. They can do it on their own. It's kind of like it is the original work, so I also do want to like honor that a little bit. But I do teach a lot of mat work when I'm like before we would use springs on the Cadillac or something, just because you are on a mat. And it is a lot more accessible for people to like have the knowledge themselves of like, okay, how do you do the first 10 exercises? You know, when I was in college and I had no access to Pilates equipment because I wasn't living at home anymore and I was on the East Coast, there were no Pilates studios around me that I knew of. I would like just do what I knew of mat work to keep myself familiar with the feeling that Pilates gives me.
And on that note, are you more classical with your mat work or contemporary? Like, are you doing like saw and all the traditional movements and stuff like that? Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Just because that was what my training was. But I have over the years developed classes that are more contemporary in style, and like the way I teach, you keep referring to the splits class, like that's more like of a contemporary approach to like movement. I did have like a whole period in 2020 where I was like, I'm just a movement instructor. I'm not a Pilates instructor. Because it was just like, it felt limiting in some ways. And there's a lot of people in the industry that have very strong opinions about classical work versus contemporary work. I do believe both have a place. And I think the contemporary lens can be helpful when you're trying to teach someone classical mat work. It's super hard.
It is
right?
hard.
So if you're able to give some modifications in a contemporary way, why not?
Yeah, that's sweet.
Yeah. So both.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Cool. Did you want to ask another rapid
Yeah,
fire?
I wanted to ask it because I know it's going to trigger you.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
Will I be more toned if I do Pilates versus weightlifting?
The word tone.
I hated that question. I also, it's in the same file cabinet in my brain as like people that market Pilates as like creating long and lean,
Oh my gosh.
right?
Mhm.
You cannot change the length of your muscle,
Literally.
okay?
Yeah.
You cannot change the length of your muscle.
Because Amanda got on me because I made the title of our core stability podcast like absolutely toned, and she was like, "Why did you use toned?" And I was like, "Because that is what people are going to look at that and be like, I want to be toned." Because everyone that comes in here is like, "How do I tone my abs? How do I tone my core?
and
How do
I get it
tone
too.
my arms?"
I get it too.
Mhm.
And then she's like, "Okay, you're right." They'll listen and then they'll hear us talk and see how where it's not about that. But anyways, go on.
I think what they refer to when they market Pilates that way is the decompression that you can feel in your spine. So that like sense of like lift and capacity to be like more extended in your thoracic spine, especially if you've had more forward posture. The work itself is going to create a lot of that strength to hold yourself upright in space. And so you're going to inherently feel a little taller. You're going to see a little bit of a longer line in the mirror. So you may interpret that as, oh, I've got all this great tone right now, when in fact nothing has changed except you've worked on your posterior chain, and so you're a little stronger in the back. You've worked on your relationship to your rib cage and your pelvis and your core, so you are holding yourself more from that centered place. So you might feel more quote unquote toned or longer or leaner aesthetically, when in reality, some people who do Pilates might never ever see those changes and are still reaping the wonderful benefits of having a movement practice that incorporates breath and control and precision and alignment, you know?
And do you think, because I feel like one of like the Joseph Pilates quotes that gets misconstrued a lot is like, in 30 days, you'll have a whole new body.
Oh, I hate that one.
I know, because I feel like it.
I internalized that quote as a 12-year-old taking my mom's mat classes when she first started her studio.
Yeah.
And we were just doing like mat classes out of a dance studio in Des Plaines. Because it was like, in 10 sessions, you'll feel a difference. In 20, you'll see a difference. And in 30, you'll have a whole new body. Okay. That quote, taken out of context, leads people to believe that they need to do 30 classes and then they will somehow look like whatever their aesthetic dream goal is. That's usually baked into diet culture, fitness culture, toxic, like femininity, pressure around body size, right?
I tell people all the time, I'm like, if you're doing an exercise just to look better, you're not going to feel great with that exercise. You're going to feel a lot of pressure and you're going to feel like you constantly have to be doing it and reaching these goals. And then you're never going to be satisfied, versus if you do an exercise because it makes you feel good, makes you feel strong and empowered.
Yes.
That's why I'm like, I don't run, because I say this all the time. I'm like, I don't run because I hate running. And like, but I do like dance because I love it. It makes me feel good. And then I'm more consistent with it because I love it, versus like, I did have a period where I was running, but just because I was like, oh, I need to run because I like ate so much the night before or like whatever.
Yeah.
And it was very toxic. And I like I had a really bad relationship with exercise in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think that what you enjoy, you will do. Right. So I'm not sitting here as a Pilates instructor saying everyone should do Pilates, because I believe that Pilates is the best form of exercise you can do.
Yeah.
I think it's good for a lot of people, and I think it's better if you enjoy it, right? If you're trying to force yourself to do Pilates because you think that it's going to give you some
magic
ideal
body,
magic
Pilates
body,
princess aesthetic,
Pilates body, like whatever,
Yep.
it's ultimately always going to disappoint you because of the way that you framed it in your mind.
Well, and like based on what you said with like the history of Pilates and Joseph Pilates and like why he started it to begin with, like that's not even what he meant when he said that. Like,
no, 100%.
It was more like you're seeing the length and you're seeing,
you're
like,
feeling your relationship to your breath, like even just breathing. And this was all of his stuff that was like 80 years ago that he was thinking and feeling all of this stuff. And I think there's a big conversation within the industry itself around, okay, if Joe Pilates were here now, what would he think of our like tech neck and our forward, like we are inherently different, and I'm teaching a different population of people than he did, right? So that's the thing too with classical versus contemporary. My approach has to change because culture has changed, because our bodies have changed, because of the conveniences of modern life. You know what I mean? Like there is that shift.
Rest in peace, Joe Pilates. You would have loved our podcast.
You would have loved it.
You would have loved pelvic POV.
There's also an image of him. I think he was like in maybe his 20s or 30s, and he was like in the snow in his underwear, you know. And then there's an image of him.
I want to be
in
the snow in my underwear.
Photo shoot. I've actually done that.
I love that. Invite us next time.
Like then there's this image of him at 83 right before he died, and you know, he has the same posture and he has this similar physique, although his body has aged. And that's kind of like something that we look at and we're like, you know, this is the body over years of Pilates, like whatever. How wonderful is that? It is wonderful. It's great. He died at 83, and it was like 1967. So it's been a while since he passed. And it's definitely an exercise routine that even the Pilates elders did well into their 80s and 90s. It's something that can be carried with you throughout your life if you enjoy it and love it and want to do it.
Yeah.
Period.
This was so good.
Yeah,
I learned so much.
I learned so much.
I'm going to use this.
I just feel like you didn't, like you as a guest were perfect, but you didn't challenge us at all, because everything you said we're like, hell yeah. Like there was nothing that we like had to like unpack.
We're very aligned in our thinking. So it's very easy to come on the podcast and be like, yeah, we just agree. It's great.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love agreeing with people.
Yes.
It's fun.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's it for like our questions, because everything else, all the other questions that we got sent in, like we kind of like tackled.
So tell us how people can find you, because
people can find me on Instagram as Blue Lace Baby, which I will tell you that story now.
Yes, I was going to say, tell us like what's specific, because Em is much more than just Pilates.
Yes,
like she does so much more. So tell us like specifically like what makes you unique too.
In 2020, when I shifted to teaching virtual and my clients were paying me directly and everything was wonderful in my world, as far as teaching, I was also like crumbling internally under the weight of my own like diagnoses and mental health issues, right? And rose quartz and blue lace agate, something for the heart chakra and something for the throat chakra, something that teaches you about self-love and something that helps you communicate. Those two stones really helped aid in my ability to speak lovingly to myself. And around that time, I took a few months in a like virtual outpatient program for depression and anxiety. And I really focused in on, okay, if I want to be this person that is teaching in an empowered way, but I am not empowered myself, like that's a problem for me. Mm-hmm. And if I want to teach in the wellness space, but I am not well myself, that's a problem for me. And it was bleeding into my teaching, which I didn't love. So I used crystals, I used therapy, I used psilocybin, I used a lot of different modalities, psychiatric care, getting diagnosed with ADHD, like to help heal the way that I was thinking and feeling and speaking to myself. So because I had a lot more time and space, because I was working for myself, I started like a little bit of a side hustle into something that I also love, which is crystals, rocks, stones, magic, witchcraft, all of that.
We always joke, like, how long does it take before Em starts breaking out her crystals at an event or at a get together?
So,
there's always videos of her like bringing up.
There's one in here.
Oh my God. Stop it right now.
So this is my stress less bundle.
Oh my God.
And so I do sell crystals on the side. And I've always loved rocks. I've always collected rocks, and Blue Lace Baby was really kind of my imagination of like, okay, if I were a crystal superhero, what would my name be? And I was like, Blue Lace Baby, I'm here to save your life with rocks. Like,
Heck
you
yeah,
know?
it's incredible.
So it's just like another little side thing that I do. I sell them out of Revive Chiropractic Healing Center.
And her crystals are like the best crystals.
you.
I'm serious. Like I only ever want to get my crystals from you.
Aw, I'm touched.
Like my next malachite.
Heck
that I
yeah.
get, I'm 100% coming to you.
Dude, I have
You
a
some good
malachite for you. So I sell crystals out of Revive Chiropractic Healing Center, where I've been historically a patient of Dr. Lay's for acupuncture and cupping as I was like moving about my healing journey. I also did her Reiki Master training program, and she lets me sell crystals out of there.
Amazing.
So it's great. And I'll do like live sales on
Yes.
Instagram and things like that. It's
And
just a fun thing.
Em also did astrology chart reading.
Oh my God, I
on my
did.
birthday. Like I wanted.
I have no actual credentials in astrological
it was
chart
so fun.
reading.
It was so fun though. No, you did a great job.
Yeah, it was
because
fun.
So for a party thing, it was my birthday, and I was like, I want to do something different. Like I just want to like chill at my apartment with some cool people. So I had Em come over, and like we sent all of our birth dates and times, and then she like printed out all our charts for us and like read our charts and like compared ourselves to each other. It's like, this is how you two are linked, and like explained. And I think it was perfect in a party setting because it's not like I'm gonna like pay for like I want a detailed analysis on who I am.
It was just
wanted
like a
fun little
sampling, you know, and it really kind of was bred from the fact that Dr. Lay will do channeled healings, which are Reiki and Tarot, and inherently somebody would not know their astrological signs, and she would like send me a little message or come up like halfway through the session like, this is their date of birth, the place they were born, and the time they were born. Can you pull up their chart information? And I know how to do that. And so I would pull it up for them and send them their information, or we would talk about it or whatever. So I just got really good at like gathering all that information really quickly. It's not hard to do. I love astrologycafe.com.
Yes, for real.
But yeah, that was a really fun thing. There's like lots of fun opportunities that I've had as I've kind of dove a little bit away from Pilates full-time teaching to, you know, working at Revive where I do office admin work. But you know, I love that place. I want to plug it as much as possible because I love it so much.
We love Revive too.
They're right across the street from us.
Yeah. And I love contributing to the vibe there. Like as a patient, it was my favorite place in the city. And so I hope to create that for the people that come in looking to find space to heal. Yeah.
Yay.
Gorge.
All right. So follow at Blue Lace Baby.
Yes.
And you can have access to all of her wonderful things that she does.
Yeah. And I don't have like an online booking for Pilates. Part of that is because I like to keep my schedule a bit lighter these days. But if you are interested in working with me, you can just shoot me a DM or get my information from Hannah and Amanda, and I'd be happy to talk about it.
And we will link her in the show notes.
Yeah.
Yes.
As well as ours.
So
as well
fun.
as ours. Make sure you're following us on social media at Pelvic POV.
And follow our personal accounts at Hannah Meyer, Meyerr.
And Amanda Neary, PT. N is in November.
N is in. Now go head up M for a Pilates class or some crystals.
Yes.
Thank you for being our first podcast guest.
Say the closing remarks.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah. Do you want to say bye, pelvic freaks?
Bye, pelvic freaks.
Bye, pelvic freaks.
Bye, pelvic freaks. And cut.
Scene.